Hello and welcome to the EVN Disrupt podcast. My name is Nijde Tsaturyan. I'm the editor of the creative tech section here at EVN Report, and today my guest was Ashot Arzumanyan, a partner at SmartGateVC, a pre-seed VC firm in Armenia. We spoke about the founding story of SmartGate, the startup ecosystem in Armenia, how it's developed over the last 18 months, challenges that startups in the country face, and how SmartGate is helping address them. Our guest today is Ashot Arzumanyan. He is a partner at SmartGateVC, a venture capital fund in Yerevan that invests in pre-seed and seed stage startups. Ashot, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Nijde. Thank you for having me.
So, Ashot, let's start with your background. How did you get started in the venture capital space, and how did you get started investing?
My background is in finance and management consulting. But last 8 years, I'm part of the startup world from the venture capital angle, being first an associate at the venture fund in Armenia and later started our own VC firm with my partners. So since 2018, we are investing from SmartGateVC.
Mm-hmm. So SmartGate got its start in 2018.
Yeah.
Why did you guys decide to create a VC firm in Yerevan, in Armenia? What was the opportunity that you saw?
Yeah, so look, when you look at the landscape back then, there were a lot of opportunities and a lot of talent, and really very little ecosystem that could nurture this talent and convert it to entrepreneurship. So we had some initial pipeline in mind, but also realized that there is so much to be done in order to kind of create a comprehensive ecosystem there. And that's how actually the fund started, which was an institutional way of advising and supporting companies, founders, our friends, and also helping them with capital. But also Hero House, which is the community arm of our fund and leverages the community effort towards supporting entrepreneurs and overall creating the ecosystem. So that's how it started and evolved to what we have today.
In 2018, am I right to say that you guys were one of the only VC groups in Armenia that was investing in early stage startups?
We were not the only, but back in 2013, 14, High Ventures and Granatus Ventures started in Armenia. So maybe I can say that we were the first to be on the ground and focusing specifically on pre-seed stage with hands-on involvement with the companies, and also very to high extent laser focused on deep tech AI entrepreneurship.
Yeah. How did you guys go about raising your first fund? Was it primarily Armenia-based investors or people abroad as well?
I think we don't have pure Armenian-based investors in none of our funds. That was a funny story when you hear back, and that was a pitch of a dream to different people about what these days actually already are, and we are on the way of the realization of this dream. But
You
back
mean the
then,
startup dream in Armenia.
But back then, it was 3 guys pitching about this dream, about this future, about these opportunities, meeting some skepticism in some cases, but thanks to those who trusted us and invested and supported back then, we could build actually the firm. We had among our first investors Tim Draper, who is not Armenian, as you know.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Tim Draper is one of the most prominent investors in Silicon Valley. He's invested in Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter. So it's a very big name in the VC community.
Yeah. So we started VC with his investment, along with some really close friends who trusted us back then, and that was the first closing. And then on consequent closings, we had many other entrepreneurs joining us as investors.
So how'd you go about getting Tim Draper as an investor? It seems like it'd be in my mind, especially in 2018, it'd be hard to go and pitch this idea to someone like Tim Draper to say that we should be investing in early stage startups in Armenia. What was his reaction?
Sure. So there are 2 parts of this. First, my co-founder and partner, Ham was working with Tim Draper in Silicon Valley before that. So as everything in the VC world, relationship
Right.
matters most of all. That was number one
Yeah.
thing. So I believe he was supporting his student.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, it was an opportunity of emerging country,
Markets.
emerging startups. So and Tim Draper is one of those investors who really looks into very different opportunities
Yeah.
throughout the world. So he back then investing outside Silicon Valley was very rare
Yeah.
for Silicon Valley investors. Like keep in mind that was pre-COVID times.
Right. Yeah.
Now after COVID things changed a lot, but back then it was very rare, and Tim Draper was among those who was experimenting investments outside Silicon Valley back then.
Yeah.
But in generally, if we look at Armenian ecosystem, there were two things. First, this diaspora that we had in the US, and we could link and bridge easily to the diaspora. But then the other important thing, and sometimes it's not really recognized and appreciated that much, but I have to mention it, it's involvement of European Union. So probably Hero House and SmartGate wouldn't be there if we didn't have that early days support from European Union for the operations. And it was not just only SmartGate or Hero House. So it was they provided a lot of early stage grants back then that enabled a lot of startups to operate. And
were they directly giving grants to startups or the startup ecosystem organizations like Hero House, Startup
No.
Academy? Or?
It was directly to startups. There were competitions and
Okay.
startups
Like pitch
were
competitions?
pitch competitions. Startups were pitching at that competitions and getting these grants. And pre-seed investment is still, we invest only when at the moment when we see already the commercial opportunity. It can be very vague. It can
Right.
be a lot of shaping needed, but we already see the commercial opportunity.
Right. Yeah.
But you still need this friends, family, and fools, let's say, segment
Right.
that invest even before the commercial opportunity. And in some countries, you can do a lot of savings. In some cases, you can have this rich family members. But the reality back then in Armenia was you don't have these people. And instead of this family, let's say, you had these grants coming and from that perspective, I believe European Union played a very important role in this early days. It still plays a major role, but I mean, in catalyzing these things and taking off, it had a very important role back then.
And are they still continuing their support of the ecosystem?
Yeah. For instance, you asked if they were providing grants directly to ecosystem or through organizations. Now, for instance, part of the grants are funneled through Armenian Startup Academy. That is part of Hero House.
Right.
So companies that get to Armenian Startup Academy are also, not all of them, but some part of them get also grants from European Union.
Right. Yeah.
So it's basically making the academy kind of similar, close to an acceleration program with investment, which is very important step at this stage when you can't actually secure, like source a whole cohort of companies that are commercially ready for investment.
Right. How has the startup landscape in Armenia evolved and matured since that time?
The change is really very dramatic. Mainly it's about a lot of expertise that is currently in Armenia that was not there back then. So when we were starting Hero House in 2017, late 2017, in fact, if you wanted some to access some expertise about Silicon Valley, about doing business, etc., probably Hero House was the only consistent place where you could visit for advice and for meeting different people for expertise, or you should fly to San Francisco. Today, if we look only on our portfolio companies, which raised Series A, seed rounds, went through a lot of hardships and difficulties and have a lot of learnings. So there are so many places in Armenia today that you can just learn, get this expertise. So companies, like employees in companies thinking of starting their own things. So there is a wave now, and this is very exciting to observe.
When you talk about expertise, you're talking about expertise in terms of creating startups, like entrepreneurship expertise or like engineering talent, engineering expertise?
I'm talking more about building a company and a business. Back then, the major trend in Armenian entrepreneurship, let's say, was to hide in a room, work on code for a year, and then find out that no one needs it.
Right.
With launch of Armenia Startup Academy and a lot of other initiatives, we were trying to bring this other perspective of entrepreneurship. So you become more exploring, you go to your potential customers, etc. And along with that, being also next to them with on technology side, which is probably one of the our key differentiators. One of our partners, Vazgen, he is an influencer in AI. So he is a professional himself for many years, and we could also bring, along with business part of things, also this technology expertise.
Right.
And these two together made a lot of difference, I believe, for many companies.
So that's how it's matured to this point where now we see a new Armenian startup raising a large Series A or a few $1 million in their seed round. That's been the biggest differentiator, you think?
That was an important contributor.
So you say that the startups that you're looking to invest in are at the pre-seed or seed round, right? How do you source those deals in Armenia? Where do you look for those deals?
First of all, our primary focus is pre-seed, so not even seed. We do sometimes follow-ons in seed, but that's very rare. So our ideal investment is pre-seed stage.
And just for our listeners who might not know, pre-seed is the very first round of investment that a startup gets when they're at the idea phase or they've just started implementing their solution.
Yeah, so that's our primary focus, and we look mainly in companies that have some differentiator also in technology.
Yeah.
So this should be ideally some very technical, very science-driven companies, then build a business, a company that is based on that IP.
Where you guys source those deals?
So sourcing. So there are a few sources for this. So first of all, it's network. And we are now span across Armenia and California with our Hero House network. And we have a lot of people, founders, advisors, mentors who are in this network. And we can hear about interesting ideas and solid entrepreneurs or engineers or others who start something very early. And in Armenia, these are mainly spin-offs from existing companies or employees of these companies with some experience. We also have a lot of cases that diaspora entrepreneurs start something, and we help to base part of their operations in Armenia. So overall, I would say right now it's mainly the Armenian world, widely defined. It's not Armenia, where Armenia is, of course, an important part of it, but it's a wider Armenian world and our networks across Armenia and US.
Do you guys invest outside of the quote-unquote Armenian world as well? I think I heard you once speak about investments in Eastern European startups. And is it the general region, or do you guys stick to Armenian founders?
We are not limited to Armenian founders ourselves. We are now actively exploring Eastern European landscape. And we believe that what we learned in this pre-seed to seed transformation on one side and then bridging this continent to the US. So this, let's call it know-how, is very well applicable also to non-Armenians. And apparently, so we are exploring also that on the Eastern European landscape. And seems that there are interesting opportunities there, and over time we expect some pipeline there and leverage the Armenian pipeline, let's say, into a wider world.
Regional. How would you say the Armenian startup landscape and ecosystem compares to some of those other countries in our region, Eastern Europe? And
we can compare ourselves probably with smaller countries and with very small market, and this is our main advantage. Because what we see in countries with larger markets, entrepreneurs see some opportunities locally. They dive into these opportunities, and then it's very difficult to become global after that. It's almost impossible. You can claim, okay, we'll test this locally and then we'll go global, etc. But to be honest, it's not realistic. Once you dive into your local market, you just stay there.
That's interesting.
Because it's very difficult. You need a mindset shift. You are obsessed with these local problems, and it's very difficult to become creative about global market or US market. So what happens? You just stay there, and but in Armenia you can't do that. So from day zero you have to think, okay, so how I sell this to a large enterprise in the US, right? How are I selling this to consumers in US if it's B2C? So whatever it is, from day zero you think about market there, you think about raising your next rounds there. So everything is laser focused towards global market. When I say global, in this case, I mean initially US, and then you can expand to anywhere else from there. And we have very good network there, very good preconditions. Diaspora in the US is very techy and tech friendly. So this gives a lot of opportunities for the founders. And by the way, this is something that we have pretty good advantage even over other pretty advanced ecosystems in Eastern Europe. So this link that we have with the US and the diaspora, it's a very huge advantage that we really should appreciate a lot.
I want to go back for a second to when you were talking about sourcing startups, you were saying that a lot of them spin off from an existing startup. For example, a team at one of your portfolio companies might decide to start a company. I'm curious about how that evolved over the years in Armenia. So maybe 10 years ago, based on my understanding, I wasn't here then, my understanding is most tech companies in Armenia were service companies in the sense that they provided their service to the global market through outsourcing and things like that. And eventually that matured into product companies. So in the early days, you had Teamable. Today you have Crisp and Superannotate and all these companies. Did those early startups, those product companies, did those spin off from those servicing companies? How is that engineering talent based?
So I don't think they were spinning out of service companies. So some service companies were spinning out of product companies. So again, so we have, let's say, Synopsys in Armenia. In a way, it's a service company because it's the R&D center arm for Synopsys. But it's not an outsourcing company, right? So it's they are working on their product. So we had Lycos in Armenia that gave birth to a huge number of almost all major outsourcing companies right now were like our product of Lycos. So in a way, product companies maybe gave birth to service companies, then vice versa. So Armenia in a way started as product companies, but not as entrepreneurs.
So foreign companies that had offices.
So it was diaspora and entrepreneurs, with some exceptions, but like these major companies, these were diaspora and entrepreneurs that were bringing this business to Armenia, or even Synopsys, they acquired companies in Armenia when they came, and some of them were Armenia-driven companies, right? So I think even in this case, it's more of product companies that gave birth to startups. Of course, existence of servicing industry helped a lot that you eventually have engineers, trained people in the ecosystem. So their role is very important. And also, we know cases that over time also service companies converted into product companies. So for instance, one of our portfolio companies, Pinsight, used to be a machine learning outsourcing company. And it converted itself into product company over time, and now it's a very different mindset, very different approach. So
okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So it was these foreign companies that had arms in Armenia that really baked that early talent, early engineering talent in Armenia that led to the further expansion of the industry here?
I think yes, that when someone is working on product, usually you have more probability of startup spin-off than someone who is working just on in service business. But I wouldn't be very categorical. So, I mean, maybe if we look at statistics, maybe we figure out that it's 50-50. I don't know. It's like
they all
just
have their
first impression.
No, you're right.
I didn't make any analysis or homework on this to answer this question.
Over the last 18 months, it depends on how you define an Armenian startup, but I got that there's about $200 million in investments in startups in Armenia. And then if you take the wider scope of startups that have a presence in Armenia but are based maybe in LA by Armenian founders, it was closer to more than 1.4 billion in total investments. There was a few very large investments in there that created that number. To be honest, I was surprised by this initially because I thought that given the situation after the war investors might be a little more risk averse in investing in this part of the world. Why the last 18 months were so successful for Armenian startups in terms of capital raised?
So first of all, it's not something specific for exclusively Armenian startups.
The whole world.
So it's global trend. Post-COVID world, a lot of money was saved and not deployed during COVID. Then there was a lot of money just printed in the economy, so people didn't have much to do except for buying some cryptocurrencies, real estate, and stocks. So there was some bubble globally, and of course that bubble should reach also Armenian startups that are not Armenian startups actually. So it depends how you look at it. Their heart is Armenian, but their business is US, right? So their customers are US. Even doesn't matter where they are registered, but where their main capital is coming from, where their customers come from. So this is in its majority US. So apparently this should be reflected in Armenian companies that are very competitive and brilliant. Like if you look the level of entrepreneurs and the products they have, so it's very highly competitive. So it's apparent that it should be reflected, and that's what happened.
That's what happened.
Just look in Armenian startup landscape. We have technology leaders globally, not yet business leaders, but we have technology leaders globally. For instance, Crisp in audio and voice, like it beats Google and everyone else in this domain. So it's not as big as Google yet, but it's
on its way.
in its niche, in its technology domain, it's better than these leaders
for the solution.
Take computer vision. So Super Annotate with its solution is state of the art globally. Take machine translation. So Model Front is a global leader. So it is even beyond competition. So soon we'll have some other companies in bio and other spaces that are going to be leaders. So we have really very sophisticated, very solid companies. And they deserve this last 18 months success, their pie, let's say, of this bubble. And I believe part of it is very solid and like hardcore that is going to remain even after the bubble.
Yeah, we shouldn't take anything away from them. I think even a lot of these companies were started before COVID, and it aligned with the time where they had a product to show investors, right? And they went ahead and they got their piece of that. The piece of that bubble, I guess. One thing that I think is really interesting about these startups raising this capital and really growing as startups is that employees at startups have stock options. They're compensated in part with equity. And when these startups exit, we're going to see a growing group of both entrepreneurs and probably angel investors. How do you see the next few years as these startups mature and exit? What type of catalyst will that be for the startup ecosystem in Armenia?
These people are going to be those who saw actual, in some cases, from birth to IPO to acquisitions to whatever. So what depends which company we look at. So this will be people who could observe this everything and be part of it. So apparently we'll have a lot of companies being started from this wave. And of course, these are going to be people who will have like millions of dollars of cash in their pockets, and they will know how this cash was generated. It's because they were part of its generation, so they will be much more looking into angel investing. And so we'll have a new generation and new type of angel investors in Armenia. So right now, when you look, majority of angel investors in Armenia are from other industries, or not really like these employees of the companies. We didn't have these exits, or they were very rare before this. But this is going to come. This is going to be a new wave, new generation.
And as opposed to the previous generation of angel investors, these people will actually be people from tech that understand the landscape better. You're saying.
This will be very different.
And this is really how startup ecosystems grow exponentially, right? Like every time in Silicon Valley a startup goes public or gets acquired, they say, 100 angels get their wings, and they go ahead and they put this capital towards new startups or their own startups. So That's, I think, one piece of the story that is really exciting to observe over the next 5 to 10 years, I guess.
You look at other ecosystems, Estonia, Sweden, others, Israel. Things start from first unicorn.
Right. Yeah.
So we can say we already have the first unicorn, Pixart, that was
last year they
generated in Armenia. Was this Genesis is in Armenia. So Service Titan, yes, but like it started in California and later expanded to Armenia. But it all takes one unicorn for an ecosystem to take off. And if you look at former Soviet Union and like Eastern Europe, how things evolved after the unicorn, you will see like it really a takeoff and exponential growth. Yeah.
So what's a country in Eastern Europe or the former Soviet Union that has had that exponential growth?
Belarus is Ukraine, although in these days it's
hard to say.
But like with their unicorn companies like Grammarly, they and Amazon Ring. I don't remember for sure if it was unicorn when it was acquired, but these kind of cases were very important in kicking off for this ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. What about the impact of, you spoke about this a little bit earlier, but what about the impact of COVID and the cultural changes that have taken place because of the pandemic? How has the global access to talent and capital changed?
There are two major things here. So access to capital, advice, mentorship.
Yeah.
That kind of went away from Silicon Valley as an exclusive place. Now online and Zoom is the place, let's say, for many cases. I believe over time it will become again like go back and converge back to more proximity based. So people will still want to invest in companies and founders that are close to them, whom they can grab a coffee with. But generally, it's not so wild anymore to invest in a founder that is not, let's say, sitting next to in the Bay Area.
Right.
Like back then, even if you were from Texas, that was so far away for a Silicon Valley investor, or even if you were like from Glendale, you can recall stories of Service Titan that was raising from Silicon Valley from Glendale and sometimes receiving very funny feedback just for their zip code. Yeah. So
it's like an hour and a half flight, I think.
40 minutes.
40 minutes.
So this changed a lot, and the world is not going to be the same again, for sure. So,
but you think it'll have some retractive?
Some for sure, because human nature didn't change, but habits changed, and perception is better right now. Then for talent, this also made a lot of changes. So now freelancing and hiring for remote work is more and more frequent. And what happens is this geographic arbitrage of using other locations for cheaper
labor.
I don't want to say like cheap labor. For instance, you can if you earn, let's say, 5 times more in US, it doesn't mean that you live even 10% better.
Right.
So this difference in salaries is kind of justified by the difference in cost base.
Cost of living.
Yeah, cost of living. So and now we see kind of equalization throughout everywhere and rising costs. I'm not sure it's very good, but this is the reality. So
let's talk a little bit about Hero House in LA, in Glendale. You spoke a little bit earlier about this being an operation with which you guys can source startups from the diaspora. When you guys are looking to invest in the larger Armenian landscape, is it important for you guys for those startups to have a presence in Armenia or have a plan to have a presence in Armenia?
There is nothing formal in this, and there is nothing that we put as a requisite or requirement. But this is something that eventually happens.
Right.
So I think that's the most important part in this story.
Yeah.
So generally, our style is not making any legal requirements or like imposing something. We just make it happen through value that can actually be generated and created through that. So through being present in Armenia. So that's how we make it happen.
What's the startup activity like in Glendale, or just in the diaspora in general? Do you see a lot of activity?
I wouldn't focus now on Glendale alone.
Right,
So
yeah.
let's say Southern California.
Okay.
And in Southern California, you don't have any leaders in pre-seed landscape. So
Is that because it's just too close to San Francisco?
I guess so. That's one of the reasons. Because it's so close, it doesn't have an ecosystem of its own, although it has all the building blocks. So it has great universities like Caltech, USC, and others. It has talent, it has people. But
the weather's good.
weather is also good. It has some industries which are leading globally. But then when you look at pre-seed landscape, there are no distinguished leaders like we could see in Silicon Valley. So there are a lot of opportunities there that we see for Hero House. And we believe over time there can be built this leadership in some niches. And that's what we are doing.
Niches like what?
In some niche areas, like maybe gaming or some specific software as a service solutions with intersection of AI.
Yeah.
So these are things that we are exploring ourselves. So we don't have this final, say, tactics and picture for us, but generally we see a lot of opportunities there.
When did you guys open the Hero House in Glendale? How long has it been?
So it was last year, July, that we launched it.
Okay, so like 6-7 months.
It was supposed to be earlier, but COVID. was a problem.
Yeah. What are some of the programs you guys run there?
The major program we have there is Gateway Accelerator, and it is focused on local community in Southern California, as well as wider Eastern Europe, which includes Armenia.
Yeah.
So we have companies from Poland, Ukraine over time being there, as well as Armenians, and both from here and from California. That's the major program. We also have Angel Network there, Hero House Angels, which primarily California-based angels, where we send their way co-investment opportunities with our fund.
Actually, before we move on, this is a theme that I think is really interesting. When you look at diasporan Armenia relations, I think one of the most successful projects has been some of these startups that started in California or in other parts of the world, and then they opened up large offices in Armenia. I think it's one of the most tangible, how would you say it, like positive impacts that the diaspora has had in Armenia. So Service Titan's office here is quite big now. They employ a lot of people. Disco has a presence here. Do you see that trend growing?
By the way, it's controversial.
Okay.
So if you look from the perspective of the whole ecosystem, it's controversial. Some may complain about new companies coming to Armenia.
Why is that?
Because it's a competition for talent,
right?
And we have a huge shortage of talent now, as well as any other country now. So it's not specific for Armenia only, but because industry is growing, no education can catch up after that growth, and we don't need juniors per se. So first of all, we need senior people. So when some company comes to Armenia, they are going after the same seniors that are existing.
Right.
But for instance, what is very important now, and which is very valuable for ecosystem in Armenia, for instance, we take same case of Service Titan, is these companies have the ability to relocate, repatriate people to Armenia, as well as non-Armenians.
Right.
So bring them to Armenia because they are very attractive as companies, well-funded, US-based, with all the structures and culture and capital available for this. So they can relocate people from other countries to Armenia and basically expand the talent pool.
Right.
So that's where their value add and impact comes to Armenia, along with, of course, a lot of knowledge and practices, just management practices that a big company brings on the table for the ecosystem.
Do we see that repatriation happening now?
We do see. It's a bit controversial. I hear that people leave Armenia, but I don't know anyone who left. Right. So I hear a lot about people leaving, but I know people who repatriated. So but it's maybe because of my network. Maybe still there are people who are leaving the country.
Right.
But I believe overall, Armenia is much better place than any other spot in the US. That one I can compare.
Right.
Can say for sure for Europe. But for US, definitely it's much better place to stay, and I think you can.
I can attest. Well, especially, I mean, now in our industry, in the tech industry, when you have these startups that are paying very competitive salaries, you know, your lifestyle in Armenia could be much higher than in the US, even if in the US they pay you a little bit more. But comparatively to, as you were saying, the cost of living, you know, if you can get into one of these companies, your lifestyle will be fantastic.
So if you live in Armenia and
Yeah.
you travel enough, like to be still be part of the global
Right,
world and
yeah.
not to
Sheltered
not
here.
to become too much local, then this is just a perfect world.
Yeah. I can agree to that to some extent. Let's talk about challenges. So what would you say the biggest challenge to Armenian startups right now is? And specifically, what are the challenges related to access to talent here? But by the way, when I say talent, not just engineering talent, but you know, these startups look for biz dev people, for marketing specialists, managers. How's the landscape for that today, and what are the solutions to fill those gaps?
So in this case, probably when we say Armenian, we mean Armenia based,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
Armenia started. So indeed, it's talent, especially in biz dev, etc., is a problem, and as well as engineering. So sometimes people tell me we want to send some jobs to Armenia. Good luck. I don't know people like, I don't know, some outsourcing jobs,
Right,
etc.
yeah.
So or set up some small dev
Yeah,
shop in Armenia.
yeah.
I say good luck. Like
This is hard to find engineers.
it's not that easy
Yeah.
thing. So it's not that people are sitting at home and
Right.
waiting for a job. So
Right.
it's different.
Right.
What is lacking is expertise, senior expertise on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, especially when it comes to sales marketing, where you have to be part of the industry, you need to have domain-specific knowledge.
Yeah.
So this is almost impossible to gain just being in Armenia.
Right.
You have to be part of that industry. You have to work there,
Yeah.
Some experience, etc., before you can do that. So here again, link to diaspora is very important. Mentorship advice in that area is very crucial, and maybe in some cases there can be co-founder matches. So some business people joining tech people here in Armenia. So these are the cases, and this is a challenge.
Yeah,
this is a challenge.
In the non-engineering side, so biz dev, marketing, sales, a lot of these initiatives in the tech community are looking to train people in those professions. For example, I know Digitain has an entire program where they train people to become project managers or product managers. Do you think these initiatives are enough, or does something need to happen at the university or business school level in order to fill this talent gap?
It's never enough.
Yeah.
The gap is big first. Second, you always need more and more professional approach to this, more and more better results. So there is a lot of work to do there.
Yeah.
It's very important and good that some of the companies do this, but also on university level, this is very important. Like, people need to be more prepared
for those roles,
to careers, and with more hands-on experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashot, my last question is, I'm going to ask this question to every guest. For SmartGate and for the wider Armenian startup ecosystem, how do you see the coming 5 to 10 years? What would be a successful outcome for you?
When we look at this 5-10 year perspective, we can take it from 2 points of view. So what's going on with Armenia and what will change in Armenia. So I believe tech is a shortcut to prosperity for the country. And what will change actually is we'll have kind of deep state. And what I mean here when I say deep state is people with capital and sense of ownership for the country.
Right.
So people who care and have power.
Right.
It won't be dependent on governments anymore. It won't be dependent on some speculations that are short term, but there will be a long-term vision, long-term understanding, and long-term backbone for the country. So this is what is going to happen when these tech people grow their businesses and become influential and powerful. And from SmartGate perspective, so SmartGate is an investor in so-called loan shots. These are companies that initially don't seem to be very attractive. So they are attractive because you are part of their journey, because you are part of them, and You know it from inside. But then they grow, and so no one notices them until everyone notices them.
Right.
So they grow and change the way we live, the change industries work. So I believe that in this 10-year perspective, we'll have some companies in our portfolio that will change not only a lot, not only for Armenia,
Right.
because they are partly Armenian, but also how people in the world live, and they will make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. I said that was my last question, but you opened a new topic that is really interesting I want to touch on for a second. So this wealth that is being generated in Armenia for these startups, these founders who are accumulating this wealth, you're right, when they speak about their involvement in Armenia, why they're doing what they're doing, they talk in a sense that they want to take ownership of problems in the country. And it's very different, I think, from the former, in Armenian we say elita, like the former elites. How do you think the values of this new group of people who will start to have large amounts of capital and want to use that capital for the development of the country will differ from the former ones?
Yeah, well, the former ones were based on stealing.
Right.
They were based on corruption and monopoly,
Right.
and monopoly in a very bad sense.
Right.
Because startups are monopolies, right? But in a very good sense, like
by merit,
by definition of Peter Thiel.
Right.
So I even don't know how this happened, because probably you could steal money, but you could have some kind of approach that some kind of level, your internal level, when you compete not for the brightness or
Right.
size of your villa, but for instance, for how fast and good is your drone,
Right.
that you developed. Even if you are stealing, but you have some different level of mindset, probably we would end up in a different condition now
than we are today. Yeah.
So it's even cultural problem, I think, that we had this last I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
So I believe this new elite that is going to come, the most important difference here is going to be this cultural difference, the difference in approach and understanding the priorities, etc.
I think especially post-war, there was a renewed sense of conversations in the tech community about what we do is we are doing in service of playing our role in the development of the country. So I think what that will bring is to be seen, but it's an extremely interesting space to watch. And then very last question. As your startups are maturing, do you guys plan to participate in their Series A, Series Bs, or are you guys going to stay focused on the pre-seed round?
Our expertise and power is in pre-seed,
right?
So we are going to be there. With our second fund, we can also follow on in later rounds. So we'll do up to seed rounds in investment, but not later.
Okay.
So because when you advance as a company, it's not so difficult for you anymore to raise from the best US VCs, right? So the key here is, the key to success is making this happen and working on the very early days.
Yeah.
And this is where our expertise is, and this is where we are going to be focused.
Keep your focus, yeah. Okay, Ashot, thank you so much for coming on and giving us the overall perspective on where the Armenian startup ecosystem is and where it's going. And in the future, I hope you'll join us again to talk about the further development of the system. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too.
Thank you for listening to this segment of the EVN Disrupt podcast. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you consume podcasts. Also, make sure to follow EVN Report on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date for more engaging content from Armenia. Thank you.